Hello, everyone. My name is Yawa Idi, and I am the program coordinator for Africa Center's Enhancing Gender Equity Program. And you are listening to Better Than the Cure, Preventing Intimate Partner Violence. This is a podcast that will feature a series of guests from different fields and sectors, all with knowledge and expertise on the factors, impacts, and consequences of intimate partner violence, specifically within African, Black, and Caribbean communities within Alberta. Today, we have a very special guest. We have Dr. Phil Okeke-Ihejirika, who is a full professor in the Women and Gender Studies Department at the U of A, University of Alberta here in Edmonton, Canada. Her research, teaching, and other professional activities contribute to a wide array of scholarly forums, embracing a broad network of academic institutions, scholars, and international agencies. And as well, she's actually the lead researcher on this project who has been informing many of the activities and deliverables, but I'll let her tell us a little bit more about herself.
Thank you, Yawa. This project is really very close to my heart. Given the concerns we have had in our communities, I come into this project not just as a scholar, but also as an elder in the community. Among many other elders, including community and religious leaders, we have been watching and with concern looking at this problem in our community and beginning to look at it not just as a family issue but as a community problem. It does dwell in other communities, but we feel that ours is really very it's something that, just like any other community, we should begin to deal with, and that it's something that we should have agency in dealing with as we work with other stakeholders. I come into this project as something of a collaborator. We give credit, obviously, to the University of Alberta that is hosting this project with the Africa Center. We credit the funders, largely the Women and Gender Equality, formerly Status of Women Canada, and the Social Science and Research Council of Canada, that is also funding our Sheikh Partnership Project. Together, all of us, both the funders and stakeholders in the community and university partners, are working together to assist in making this community project a preventive project on intimate partner violence, to really go down to the roots, to get to the grassroots. And we do hope that this will be a very unique one in terms of the way in which we constitute stakeholders.
Thank you for that. So today we have a lot of road to cover in terms of informing people and giving people the baseline of understanding intimate partner violence and gender relations, especially within African, Black, and Caribbean communities. So to start that off, I wanted to ask you, when we talk about gender relations, which is defined as social relationships and distribution of power between men and women in the public and private sphere, can you provide a little bit more insight or talk about what gender relations specific to African, Black, and Caribbean communities, specifically in the diaspora, what that looks like and how that differs from perhaps gender relations back home in these countries of origin?
We do know that gender relations exist in every social landscape. Our own, we could look at some of the unique elements of ours. It could be in somewhat comparable to others, but I would say that Western colonization of Africa has had an impact on what we may refer as our own culturally oriented gender relations. Today, we still also see vestiges of our culture in the way men and women relate within and outside the family, however you configure the family. We realize that for those who become immigrants in Western host societies like Canada, it becomes also a little bit, gender relations become complicated in the sense that they have to deal with shifts in their roles. Things might change when people come here in terms of access to jobs and other social opportunities. It might favor men or women, and this could also impact on gender relations. We also know that religion could be an impact, both at home for those who are immigrants and when it comes woven into their lives here. All of those shifts impact on gender relations and could have very severe consequences. One of the ones we have seen is intimate partner violence.
And I love you recently you've said that intimate partner violence is actually a consequence of gender relations gone wrong. And the emphasis of this project has been on prevention. So I wanted to ask you, we also have intervention services, which are amazing and definitely needed, but why the emphasis on prevention? Why the need on tackling this at the root? What implications do prevention services or a project like this have on the consequences of intimate partner violence?
Prevention, this kind of program is very crucial because we are getting to the roots of the problem. As I often say, intimate partner violence, for the most part, is gender relations gone bad. There may be other factors that made it to go bad, but we need to go to the beginning and not look at just the consequences. It's often not very easy for those who do not have the cultural knowledge or the historical context to go into these kinds of problems. Sometimes culture could be a Pandora box. So it's important to look at what is happening in the cultural context. It's also important to go to knowledge keepers. We do often neglect those who could make huge impact in what we do in trying to prevent intimate partner violence. So a program like this, first of all, you're able to address the roots, which is going into gender relations and all the social and political and cultural context. Secondly, you're able to go to the knowledge keepers who are in our communities to be able to work with us. Also know that this is a project, this is an issue that is very sensitive. And so it would also require for us to approach it in some of the ways that will build trust. And that is why I'm also happy that in this project we are bringing in elders, both male and female elders. I think at the end of the day, we begin with prevention.
Right.
Because prevention points to those very major roots, like cultural, our own cultural etiquettes, where impact of colonization, the impact of religion, all of those are things that you can begin with when you do prevention. We hope that as we continue with prevention is also a way of educating, also awareness raising. We take it for granted that people mean the same thing. I'm looking at where we are intentionally coming to terms as communities, as Black communities, to name the problem and attack the problem and own the problem, rather than pushing it to individuals or basically pushing it to the mainstream.
Right, right. No, that's very insightful. And then when we look at prevention, we know this is not a single person. Not a single person can tackle this issue. So, if you have a table and you're talking about prevention, who do you think needs to be at that table? What resources need to be at the table to successfully create a framework or create a program or initiative that can efficiently prevent intimate partner violence on a broader scale?
For me, I usually ask myself, who are those who will have a stake? Who are those who will be highly impacted as victims or survivors? Who are those who have power to make a difference? When it comes, and who are those who have knowledge? I begin with those who have knowledge. I would say that I look at those who have perhaps academic knowledge because they have studied this issue. So scholars who are from anywhere,
Right.
but particularly those who are from our communities, so that they're looking at it not just as scholars, but this is an experience that they are very familiar with. I also look at those who I call knowledge keepers that we often neglect, formal and informal channels, such as community leaders and religious leaders, that they do have knowledge that we must tap. But I also look at the fact that I look at men who play a critical role in our communities. We tend to ignore them when we are dealing with intimate partner violence. A lot of the programs and services do not really bring them in as stakeholders.
Right.
So that's one of the good things I like about this program, that is bringing all the stakeholders, particularly those who have power, pastors, imams, other community leaders, men in their role as in the family, as spouses, as fathers, have a role to play. I also consider those who might be impacted. We talk a lot about women, we talk about a lot about youth, but often we forget some of our communities intersectionally. For instance, members of the LGBTQ, those who consider themselves trans or queers, are part of our communities. We may not hear much about them,
Yeah.
but we need knowledge from them. We need their own experience because we are working to protect everyone. This is about community well-being and safety. And all members of community, their various jurisdictions must be considered.
Because oftentimes, yeah, those marginalized communities, for example, the youth or LGBTQ, fall through the cracks, and a lot of this work actually impacts them. So having them at the table is definitely crucial in terms of prevention if we want everyone on a broader scale in the community to benefit from the
And of
well-being.
course, I'm also happy that we brought the mainstream agencies, their representatives were part of this, even the building of this program. We recognize that they do have skills. We recognize that we need to build a bridge with them, we need to be better equipped. So having that bridge is also a forum for expanding our network and also getting better equipped and building our capacity. So for all of those that were involved, they really have impacted this program positively.
The coalitions built between different sectors. For example, we often see that groups are working in silos, all doing the same thing, but they're missing that interaction and link that could actually help everyone on a larger scale. In terms of gender relations, again, we know that each culture, like you said, has their own social landscape. So what was done back home is different than what was done here in Canada. So how can we make space for gender relations that are evolving, but still rooted in culture or traditions that people want to keep?
Yeah, it seems to me that we often think that there is some kind of a newly minted or a static African culture. Every culture, including those of Africans in their diversity, have been changing for centuries. Whatever we brought here, much has been left at home. We continue to evolve as a people, anywhere from the very beginning of the world, whenever it began. So the way I look at it is that we must consider what will serve us here. My own take on it would be that no culture is static, and when we come to a new homeland like Canada, it's not. We have to ask whatever it is we are keeping, is it going to serve us? And to that extent, I would say that culture should serve us. We shouldn't serve our culture. If it's no longer relevant in the 21st century, we ditch it. If it's no longer relevant in Canada, we ditch it. If it's no longer relevant for the next generation, it goes. There will still be a whole lot of culture for them to maintain their African identity and pride. Those aspects that would enable us to maintain that identity and pride, which you can showcase to the world, is what we want to have here. But Canada being a multicultural society, we also have a lot to gain in terms of best practices from everywhere that we can borrow from Canada. So to me, evolving cultures mix also means some kind of mix and match.
Yeah, keeping what you need to keep and then getting rid of what you don't need to keep. But how receptive do you think the community will be? Is that understanding, broadly known that, when people come here, that they don't have to keep everything from back home and they can take on some aspects of this new society? How receptive do you think the African Black or Caribbean community would be to that? And does that serve a challenge in engaging a conversation around intimate partner violence?
Yes and no. Yes, it's a challenge to decide what to keep and what. But to me, it's really more of that we need these conversations. It's not change is slow. Change requires conversations. They would require us doing some rethinking. Conversations do not happen in one day. This project has triggered that conversation. We are moving not to build Caribbean communities or to build West African communities. We are moving towards building what I call intentional communities. We would have to take care of not just our cultural preferences, but also causes within our communities, those we have before, like intimate partner violence, but also those that are manifesting, those that are emerging. These are all the things we need to begin our conversation. I'm glad that at least we have started, but it's conversations that lead us to where we begin to ask, what do we keep and what do we not keep? Because a conversation is also a way of sharing information and informing one another. We are doing this project is also building community because we have that assumption that there is this well knitted together African or Black or Caribbean community. It doesn't exist. We are very diverse community. So part of what we are doing here in a project like this is also to build that community where healthy gender relations can thrive.
And I like the fact that you mentioned building or starting that conversation, because at the very beginning of this project, we saw that it was a little bit difficult to have community members come out and actually talk. We had very little engagement. So what are some challenges, do you think, that are associated with engaging the community in this conversation, and what are strategies to mitigate that? So hopefully the next time we have, a community engagement event, and we want people to come out to talk, people will come out and talk. So in your opinion and your expertise, what are the challenges of getting people to come out, and how can that be rectified?
I will begin with some of the really good things that this project has done, and that is go into the community instead of expecting the community to come to whoever is, those who are in charge of this, identifying the stakeholders, identifying those who do have power and influence to do something, identifying those who are often marginalized and giving them voice, giving them agency, not just to speak, but to contribute to whatever information or whatever strategies we have in going ahead with this prevention project. That is one good thing that we have done. I would say that the challenge we have is to continue that conversation, and that is because we can't say that we all agree on certain things because of our religious preferences, because of also sexual orientation, our class, our ethnicities. These are social intersectionalities that divide us. So we will have to, the challenge is really to find a way for us to begin to bring our communities together on what do not divide us, but what brings us together. It seems to me that continuing that conversation is very important. Off the top of my head, I can't say this is how we will do it. But to me, I would say that the focus should be on the things that we share, the commonalities that exist among us, and the concerns that are shared concerns. I think we all want to do well here. I think we want our children to do well. I think we want to, by the time as we get older, at least for people like me, we exit or wherever we are, that the next generation will be proud to call themselves Black, that they will have best practices in terms of their family traditions and gender relations that would spell an omen that that will attract people. But getting to that is going to be very difficult. But I always say, let us begin because we are we are hugely diverse. Even just the Caribbean community or just the African communities, we are hugely diverse. Let's focus on building intentional communities. As difficult as it is, let's begin with what we share, our shared concerns.
And we often talk about continuing the conversation and getting it started, which is definitely a great first step. But what else needs to be done beyond that? So, we call it the community, we meet and we talk. But how often can we keep on talking before it's time to see action or time to see momentum move? How long do you think that will take for beyond the conversation for actual implementations to happen that can make the change that we're looking for?
It seems to be that as we do these conversations, we should also start taking some actions. I want to see community leaders come together and start enacting policies. I want to see policies that tell us how we should relate with one another, how we should protect one another. I would like to have organizations like the Africa Center in collaboration with other entities like local immigration partnerships, City Hall, governments at the provincial and federal level enact policies for community living. We don't want people to enact policies for us,
Right.
but we want us to generate policies that can be brought to a level where we can actually start working on these policies. I see that it's good to talk, but we really should come to a point where people know that no, you can't do this in our community. I want to see our communities to the point of our communities being mobilized, mobilizing themselves to stand against something like intimate partner violence. The way we used to do, we often do it in Africa, for instance, where I could come from, is we shame you if you do things like that. We ostracize you. We don't have the power for your paycheck or stuff, but we make you a persona non grata in our communities. There has to be some way of passing that information, sending that message that this is not tolerated. So far, it's not happening. And this is where I want female elders to rise. Because in African traditions, it's usually the female elders who stand up against these things and demand that the men stand up to. I really want to see I know that this project includes female elders. They will have voices at various stages. I want them to rise and begin to demand that some kind of checks and balances be placed here, given the fact that we have very little support systems. So I'm looking at that mobilization of communities, and I look at the power and the influence of female elders to do this work.
No, definitely community mobilization is big, because I think someone mentioned community ownership. Like outside of Africa Center or, the UVA doing this project, it really has to be in the hands of the community if it's going to go any further. So when we talk about engaging and mobilizing the community, what is the first step to that? Is it simply calling out community leaders? Is it calling on the female elders? Is it going to government officials and saying this is what the community has to say? What if a community leader was hearing this, how could they best take that on to mobilize their community and tackle intimate partner violence? And who would they need to call on to do that?
Off the top of my head, I think of community leaders, starting with female elders, speaking up, whichever organization they belong to. I have begun that process for myself as a poster child, in the sense that both in terms of my marital status, my religious status, my status as a mother, as an elder, many of us are privileged. We are placed in positions where we should speak. I know that there are women, they might be younger, they may have less voice. There could be various reasons why they may not be able to stand up and speak. But I do know that there's quite a good number of us who are privileged and who are well placed, even in public platforms, to speak against those things.
Right.
And it just seems to me that we have not mobilized these female elders. I also want to say that the tradition of female elders, as much as it exists in Africa, it hasn't been carried forward as much. Those who were raised in the villages would know about that. Those who were raised in the cities know something about it, because this idea of respect for elders and the perception of elders as knowledge keepers has continued to remain with us. But the tradition of female elders is more vivid in the village. So somebody may be a female elder here and may not see the reason why they should do these things. But I want to assure many of them that many African societies give you that right to do it. And for me, I speak not just as a scholar, I speak not just as a female elder, I speak as a Christian. I speak up, and if it's in a situation where I have to discuss with with pastors and talk with them, it is something I have taken up, because we will have to work together. We seek people like the community leaders and religious leaders. They are helpful to us. We go to them. We don't expect them to come to us. We go to them and we converse with them. It seems to me that we feel, because people are of a particular religion, they support intimate partner violence. I haven't seen that.
Yeah.
The fact is that they really have their hands full in these issues, and they are also asking the question, what can we do? So our question is to go to them and say, how can we help? I want to go beyond talking, to go into those people, to ask, how can we help at their own leadership levels? Could we have a gender policy? Could we have a intimate partner policy, gender relations policy? Could we help you develop that?
Right.
Along your own religious beliefs? I think that from what I know of the Christian religious beliefs, there is room for that.
and leveraging the trust and impact they have within their community members
Yes,
and
yes.
congregations. Yeah. And you also mentioned the status of being a mother, which is among one of the many hats that you wear. And when we identified themes within this project that contribute to intimate partner violence, such as gender relations, education, employment training, finances, parenting was also a big one. So through your role of a parent and maybe an academic, because you're very well versed in this project, what are some roles that parenting plays in contributing to intimate partner violence here in Alberta with African, Black, or Caribbean communities? How is it? Because back home parenting is a lot different than it is here. You have help, you have a big community, raising your family back home, but with here you're mainly isolated, can be alone. So what conflicts do you find in terms of a parent, perhaps between a man and a woman, that contribute to intimate partner violence?
I would say that, first of all, limited support system is a problem. Some of the issues that have to do with parenting, childcare, cooking, especially for the elite, who are the majority of immigrants, are probably solved at home because either you have people who help you, whether they are relatives or non-relatives. We don't really strictly live as nuclear families. And so somehow we're able to gather and lean on existing support systems. Uh, when we come here, we lose those support systems. We are stripped of relatives or other people who could help us, extended family, etc. So that is where couples or partners problems could begin in their relationship. I also say that conflicts could also be religious. Uh, Maybe things are accepted, but when people come here, they become more informed. They begin to question if if they are really religious beliefs, can they be tied to something? For me, for instance, I would say that as I read the Bible more, I began to realize that some of the things I observed in church was really, some of them are cultural, some of them are actually middle class Western beliefs, some of them are colonial beliefs. In my reading of the Bible, I begin to see some divergence between what I was told and what I saw. I would also say that often when we come here, issues like employment, access to employment for men and women, could also become a problem. So this parenting is an issue too, because we come to see that there's an African way and a new way. They are not quite removed, but it's just that the way you parent in Africa may not be exactly because it's a new homeland. Things will shift. These are some of the things that bring intimate partner violence. And what this project will do is that that conversation around things like how do we keep our money together? Religious beliefs. What are our religious beliefs? What about budgeting? How do we do parenting
Right.
in the absence of support systems, etc.? These are conversations which we need to have,
Right.
educate ourselves, and decide what will be our best cause, our best pathway to thrive in this new homeland.
And as we go forward and everything you mentioned, there's obviously going to be, whether it's services or deliverables or things to address those issues. How can we measure it? How can we know that, okay, this parenting issue, this is what we developed for it. How do we know that this is working? How do we know that the difference that we want to see is actually happening in the community when it comes to intimate partner violence, whether it's, decrease in intimate partner violence rates or, an improved in well-being in certain communities. But what's the best way to measure this change?
There are various levels of measuring effect. In something as sensitive as intimate partner violence, we begin first of all by what people call reaction. If we are having conversations, how people react. Usually at the end of a conversation, people might say, oh, I really enjoyed this. Or so one, another thing is information. Was I really well informed about this? What we are doing now is what we could measure, how people reacted to it, and if indeed they were well informed. The matter of if they began to practice whatever seemed to be whatever cause of action, or if they act on the knowledge they have received, is something that will come with time.
Right.
And if it has any impact, because I could be going by the information I received, but somehow the impact doesn't seem to be obvious. So one is at the end of the day is really what impact, which means has intimate partner violence gone down in our communities. That will come with time. And that is why this project must not end. We must find a way to continue the conversation, to continue the discussion towards generating policies, and to continue mobilizing female elders for them to continue to speak out, to find a forums, platforms where our people can learn about how to rework parenting, rework, also gain financial literacy, etc. So we know that funding, public funding for something like this come and go. We need to find other pockets of funding to continue this conversation so that we can go from reaction, learning, to impact.
No, impact is definitely a big thing. And I like the fact that you mentioned time, because I think a lot of people might expect to see the change overnight, which is not realistic. And you mentioned time, you mentioned funding, and when we talk about modes of delivery, what is the best way for these things to reach our community? Because there's specific ways and cultural contexts that our community might receive these learnings better. So in your experience, what is the best mode of delivery to get this information out to our community, or to change the ways we parent, to change the ways we understand financial literacy, to improve our employment and education and training, so that we might see a bigger impact in terms of reducing intimate partner violence?
It seems to me that we want to reach as many audiences as possible. We also want that message to be delivered by people they trust, people that have credibility before them. It looks to me that we are on a good starting point. One, we are developing various channels, which means we have written, printed information, we're going to have videos, we're going to have audios, we're going to have visuals. So we're basically targeting various channels. We are looking at what also various age groups might consider the first, second generation. And also, I think linking this, bringing in stakeholders like community and religious leaders, female elders, is also a way of giving, of bringing people who have credibility
Right.
that we look up to. And finally, the fact also that this project is community based, means that we're also giving ownership to that, to the communities involved.
And when we talk about, because you mentioned earlier, when we're taking a stand against intimate partner violence, and we want to make it clear this is something that's not tolerated. Anyone that partakes in this, you will be kind of shamed and ostracized, which I understand. But in terms of, we want people to be accountable, but also to grow. So my question is, how can we ensure that people who engage in these, be it men or women, abusive, violent behaviors, are held accountable, but still given space to grow and to reform and to change attitudes and behaviors and thinking when it comes to intimate partner violence?
This is where I really feel that the interactive discussions we will have with the youth and those who work with youth, various, I call them service providers. A pastor is a service provider, an imam is a service provider. We are told that these community entities tend to be the first port of call in marginalized populations. If we can get a buy-in from them, if we can begin to work with them, if we can begin to have share, if we begin to walk this path as people who are addressing shared concerns, once they begin to accept this and address it and take it on and own it as shared concerns, it seems to me that we will make impact, first of all, in terms of getting people to listen, putting some kinds of accountability. Because if I use the example of a church, if you do something wrong in a church, you are reported. Perhaps the first set of people might be just some leader in the church will talk to you. It could go to the deacons, and then it could go to the pastor. And beyond the pastor, it could actually mean being removed from the church. If we have a situation where we have this buy-in, and we're actually counseling, where people have issues, and it's not a question of if you don't do this, this happens, but we are working together. It's no longer just a religious problem. It becomes a social problem. We are looking at what is happening in the marriage, with the children, with the person. Is it going to affect their employment? This is where we may be dealing with substance abuse. We may be dealing with narcissism or whatever. All kinds of the social workers, the psychologists will shed light on what is happening. If we are all working together, it seems to me that first of all we'll gain a better understanding. Those like pastors, imams who people go to very quickly will also gain knowledge and also have support where to send people to with matters that are above their heads. Certainly religious matters they have a good handle on, but it may not be a religious matter, or it may be more than that. If it's something like substance abuse, places for them to go. So it looks like it's just working together with these stakeholders. It will take time to form that very deep connection and collaboration, but we're already on our path.
Yes, yes.
We're on track.
Definitely the first step is everything that we're doing here and now. And as we wrap up here, again, you're a scholar by profession and academic, but I know at the beginning of this project, when you're looking through the literature, there was very, very little literature and data basically on this population with this issue. So I wanted to ask, what do you think the implications are for not having data to begin with, and how important is it that future researchers collect more data on this population with this specific issue?
The debt of data in this matter is very, very is very serious, because we are talking about something that is very sensitive. It is very stigmatized. People even is highly underreported. We need to get that data, because that's how people could start coming out of the woods. We get it for people to start. If we have that information, there's so much we do not know about our people. Yes, we have heard so much about intimate partner violence especially in the mainstream. Often we find these kinds of knowledges basically hoisted on us. But we really need to find out what are the specificities that we experience as a diverse community. Even my own experience as a Black person who is from a particular African country, a Christian, impacts of circumstances of migration, uh, religion, all of those things are diversities that we need to get at the bottom of in order to develop, because that's what enables us to develop what we call culturally appropriate programs and services. It doesn't come in one day.
Right.
So it will help us, and developing that is important. But even for you to develop that, you need funding. So when we explore further and we get this information, it also enables us to have conversations with policymakers. Policymakers are there to understand social problems and where they feel there is need to provide funding and other support systems for that to be addressed. What will they do when there's no funding, when there's no data? So part of this also is to aid policy development.
So do you think an outcome of this project potentially could be future research projects on intimate partner violence in African, Black, Caribbean communities within Alberta or Canada at large?
Yeah, I see this moving into further research projects. What actually excites me about this project is that it looks to me that far more than we expect of research projects will come up because of the stakeholders we have brought to the table. For instance, those from marginalized regions of our communities, such as members of the queer community or trans, who is leading their research, who is cheerleading for them, who is there for them. If we have this kind of with this kind of work, the background is there. The findings of this project would lead to many other projects, and in fact, it is already leading to a number of projects by Black scholars in collaboration with other scholars. We haven't even gone very far. So I'm really excited that they will be getting insights from the community, not simply from reviews of literature, but they are listening to what community members and community stakeholders, community leaders and religious leaders are telling us. Young people in our communities, the youth, are telling us. And from there, we can actually build more meaningful research projects than those who simply come out of reviews of literature.
Right. Right. No, thank you for that. And I think that those research projects are going to go a long way so that those that are coming after us to doing the work have something to build off us, because we know at the very beginning it was very, very scarce.
It was.
And but no, it's been a great start so far. And I just want to thank you for your time today, your knowledge and expertise. And last question for you: how can people listening or tuning in keep up with you, the scholarly work that you're doing, the work in the community that you're doing? Where can they find you to either connect or to keep up with what you're doing further on?
That is very, very easy. I would say that I'm fondly called Dr. Phil in the community. My main research program is called PACE, the Pan African Collaboration for Excellence. If you type it on the internet, it's pace.ualberta.ca. It shows you the whole research program. If you want to look at the our partnership, my research that focuses on African Black immigrants, those who are coming from, we call them continental Africans. My again my other website called pran.info, pran.info, partnership for research with African newcomers. You would also find a lot of what we are doing. I will also say that as the vice chair of the Africa Center Governing Board, I am very, very present at the center. I am ready to meet you at the U of A. I'm ready to meet you at the Africa Center or any part of our communities, whether it's in the church or in the mosque or any of our cultural sites, associations. I will be very, very happy to continue these conversations. I'm also using this opportunity to invite more pastors, more imams, and other religious leaders within to really join us in this project, because from what we have heard so far, it is a problem they know about. It's a problem they are concerned about. I'm also inviting more female elders. We are building on this group and hope that soon we will start working together to begin that process of mobilizing our communities.
Amazing. So you heard that she's very easy to find and very accessible. That's Dr. Phil here. Thank you so much for your time, knowledge, and expertise today. And thank you all for listening to Better Than the Cure, Preventing Intimate Partner Violence. We hope that you were able to glean some knowledge, some insight, something that you can use for yourselves, your communities, or your organizations in preventing intimate partner violence within African, Black, or Caribbean communities here in Alberta. And we will see you all next time. Thank you for tuning in. Take care.